Welcome to the More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to call it, real debate without the hate. Hi, I'm Kevin Kelton. I'm a moderate Democrat living in Los Angeles, California.
I'm Cliff Dunn. I'm a Republican living in Newport News, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Greg Matuzak, your under-the-weather liberal Democrat from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hi there, I'm DJ McGuire from Suffolk, Virginia. I'm a refugee from the Republican Party. Thankfully, the Democrats let me in.
I'm Rebecca Kushmiter, and I'm one of the Democrats who welcomed DJ in.
So this is going to be kind of a special episode of the More Perfect Union podcast. As our regular listeners may know, we tape on Sunday evenings over Skype. And at the end of the broadcast, once we've said goodbye, we usually stay on the phone for a while longer and continue chatting, and sometimes those conversations can be even more interesting than what we put on the air. So we thought this week we'd put together a special episode and let you hear what we talk about after the More Perfect Union is over. We think you'll enjoy it.
We didn't even get to the Mexico City policy, which is where I really thought we'd be going after each other. But we just there was just good old Donnie President. He throws up something on Friday that just burns through everything that happened the week before.
Yeah. Well, and you had all the go back and forth about the march sizes and how big him saying about the March for Life being really big and blah blah blah. Just it's timing.
How is he still talking about the march sizes? How is that still a...
Because every morning he gets in the shower and he can see the size of his dick in the mirror and he feels sad all over again.
I was about to say he can see the size of his march in the mirror.
His crowd.
Rebecca, that's funnier. But the simple fact is, if you rely in part on the tenets of mob rule to ram your policies through, and to an extent Trump does rely on rule of the mob, then your mob has to be bigger than the other guy's mob or the other side's mob.
Air quotes mob.
Yeah, right. He has small mobs, but
tiny mobs.
Tiny mobs. Does he ever say my mob's is a grower, not a shower, or?
But the simple fact is,
it shrinks.
Well, because it was cold weather. That's why it was so small, my mom. Because of the cold weather?
Actually, now, you know what? The hell with it. I'm drunk enough. I'm going to be really dirty. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you don't have a mob big enough, you're not going to be able to skeet the policies that you want.
Right. You can't please the policy.
Yeah. Because it's not the size of your mob, it's the motion of your ocean.
Right. I'm reaching on that one. You can't... I don't know.
Okay, you're all too old. You're all too old. None of you do any of you actually know that skeet is a bad word now?
No.
Or is that just me? Because I have kids.
Skeet's not a bad word. Maybe in West Virginia.
No,
skeet.
What is it?
Skeet's a bad word now.
Current meaning.
Skeet's an ejaculatory term.
No, I'm sorry.
So who's been sticking with the English language now?
I'm sorry.
It is. I actually had somebody who's 27, and I looked at her and I said, "I'm old enough to remember when you could say skeet in polite company." And she went, "Oh my god!" Because she's 27, she can never say skeet in polite company because she knows the nasty term it means now.
So I can't take my kids to play skeet ball anymore?
You're gonna break DJ, Kevin. Come on. Gonna be choking to death on
Kevin.
Fire bourbon.
It was the same. It was the same thing as ejaculation, shooting for that little 50 hole. and I would bank it too, just like in skeet ball.
So hey, which was a worse rollout, this immigration or Obamacare?
Obamacare.
This was worse.
Because this wasn't a rollout. This was a blowout. This is like when your baby poops up its own back.
I wish I could disagree with you.
Something tells me that's meaningless. Well, it's Greg gets it, and I mean I know Cliff understands it, but it's a little meaningless to him.
It actually brings back memories for me.
Horrible memories, isn't it? You know?
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
yes, it does.
But
horrific memories.
Yeah, well, remember everything
you
old
can
is
tell
new
I
again.
have the youngest kids here. I mean,
But the thing about O'Care is, as soon as Scott Brown won the special election, it was obvious that Obamacare was only going to be enacted if the House swallowed it and passed whatever came out of the Senate.
Well,
they never had the chance
to ejaculation again.
They never had the chance to Kevin, that was a Playgirl reference, wasn't it?
No, it was a reference to Swallowed It.
To Ski.
Okay. I thought that was a Playgirl reference to Scott Brown. But the
It
fact
could
of the matter
also
is,
be that. We try to forget that most of the time.
yeah, I know. But Scott Brown is the kind of guy who simply, manages to penetrate any discussion.
Yeah. But what you're talking about is when reconciliation first became a national buzzword.
And
Yeah,
ironically,
right.
it wasn't actually used because they didn't use reconciliation. They just enacted what came out of the Senate before Brown's election.
Right,
because
but they used
thought
reconciliation to make some minor tweaks to the law.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not going to dispute because those have been forgotten in the Chief Justice's rewriting of the law,
right,
and in the former president's rewriting through executive order. So the reconciliation issues, I've just forgotten them over time.
Yeah, I will say I think that this does have one distinction with Obamacare, and that's that while this is, at least for the moment, a very focused cluster, Obamacare was a rolling problem over the course of several years.
That was something else we didn't talk about. The leaked audios from the Republican retreat.
Oh, I know.
Said, "Oh my God, this is going to be Trump care. It's going to be our fault. We don't know what the hell we're doing." And I got to say, as someone who was a Republican during most of the Obama administration, that just really upset me. Y'all had 7 years.
7 years. It's pathetic. From a political
perspective, from an optics perspective, to some extent, this is the "you had one job" moment, where for 7 years you essentially had one job to present an alternative on this to the American people, and it's just unbelievable to me that they still haven't actually been able to coalesce around one. Even now, at the point where you would expect that they would have at least tried to figure it out. I mean, for crying out loud, you can argue about Rand Paul's replacement idea, and it has some holes that need to be filled. But at least it's something. It's something that he clearly spent some time thinking about and figured out, okay, how can I sort out the deductibles issue, the insurance plan restrictions issue? How can I work around the pre-existing conditions matter? He actually put some thought into it. But apparently nobody else did.
Well, and this is one point where I will, somewhat reluctantly come to Trump's defense on not having something together, is that I think he among others, myself included, sort of presumed that the Republicans had something together.
It's not about Trump. Not about Trump. I'm talking about the Republicans in Congress.
Republicans
were overheard saying they don't know what the hell.
No,
Trump didn't give a damn about this until he noticed he was running for president. I get that. But there are people who stood up and voted no on the patently deficient and unaffordably careless act in 2010, and they still haven't figured out what the hell they're going to do to replace it.
Well, that's because this is self-evident, but that's because there is no answer. They're pretending that there is a solution that simply does not exist. It doesn't exist in the physical world. What solution could keep those? What could keep those 20 million people?
There are ways to make it more market. There are ways to make the current. And this is a part of the issue. A part of the problem is that we're all arguing about repealing and replacing everything else. I would take a more high level view. How can you make the healthcare system more efficient and more market friendly and better for consumers? There are ways to do that.
Yes, there are.
The fact that they never even bothered to focus on that really bothers me.
Because that would have been fixing Obamacare, and they didn't want to do that. But
it doesn't matter. You could say we're gonna repeal 100% Obamacare and then we're gonna replace it with 60% Obamacare and some improvements. It does. Those are all just words. What people care about is what does the policy mean to them.
You're right.
And the fact that they didn't think about what the policy means to them just really pisses me off.
And the other thing, this is something DJ and I touched on the very first time we ever talked about Obamacare, is that there's a very limited universe of what you can do to the system we have with its many layers and its infinite complications to change it. I mean, if we're not going to blast the whole thing into a sheet of glass and build fresh, what we can do to change it and make it more market friendly and make it more patient centered is limited.
Well, and I will say from a political perspective, I think there actually is – the Republicans would, I think, almost be better off doing something that was unpopular than doing nothing.
I agree.
Amen.
I agree.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Do you think – okay, Cliff, let me ask you this. Cliff, should they have gone and said, you know what, let's do universal health care? you know what, we'll just do this. We'll do it right. We may lose a couple people, but do you know how much? What's the statistic there? Like 20?
Look, what they hate about Obamacare, they hate the whole thing. But what
Okay,
the two
hang
things
on,
that
hang
they
on.
hate
Stop.
most.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, do you really want single-payer health care when Donald Trump is the single that you're talking about?
Well, that depends. Is he spending taxpayer money or his own money?
Good point. Back to Kevin.
Taxpayer money exists.
Your 2 points, Kevin. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the two things that they definitely want to do away with above all else is the individual mandate and the subsidies. And if you do away with those, there's no way to put together a system that covers the 20 million people that are currently insured because of Obamacare. So it's physically impossible.
If they leave Medicaid expansion alone, then over half those 20 million are taken care of. A number of the ones who are on PDUCA plans actually lost pre-PDUCA plans, ended up having their insurance essentially downshifted. Now, there are some people who got plans only because of the PDUCA, and they would be hurt by a repeal. No argument there. The penalty for not taking insurance can be replaced by a credit for taking insurance. The incentives are the exact same for the American people. In terms of the subsidy, you're right. They really have no answer to the subsidy issue, and that is the biggest hole in every replacement plan, is that they're going to take the subsidies away and they don't have anything to replace them. They say that they are going to remove some of the restrictions on healthcare plans to make healthcare plans cheaper, and that I can understand.
Make healthcare plans less comprehensive as well.
It'll be
a cheaper product because it's a less good product.
But the fact of the matter is, Rebecca, there are a lot of Americans who are very comfortable with less than fully comprehensive products. Now,
just
whether
ask
that's
Spirit Airlines.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
I mean,
my point,
the problem is that it doesn't become a consumer choice when you start saying insurance companies can define what a health insurance plan is. You sort of end up back in a Wild West where they're like, yes, this is health insurance and it'll cover you if you get run over by the number 6 bus on a one-way street on a Tuesday, but nothing else.
That sounds like a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, but no,
Yeah, I also think the question is, for a lot of folks in the right and the center right, the assumption is that if you make health insurance essentially a government monopoly, which is largely what Canada does. It's not quite what Britain does. Then that is somehow a tipping point where America irreversibly turns into a wishy-washy social democracy. Now, I don't think government monopoly insurance is the way to go. I have issues with it on a policy level. But Great Britain but Canada, for one, which actually bans private insurance in major medical, is rated by the Heritage Foundation as more economically free. The Great Britain is not quite as economically free as we are. But you know what? Their postal service is a for-profit private entity now. Their rail service is for-profit private entity contracts. So the notion that the notion that the healthcare market is the be-all and end-all of whether you are a free enterprise country or not is not necessarily true. And I say this as somebody who thinks that the Brits have it wrong with the National Health Service and that Canada definitely has it wrong by banning private insurance in major medical. This has become a symbolic issue far more than it should be.
Okay, Rebecca, I did want to say that I think part of the underlying issue is it's one thing to say you have to, that the insurance company has to offer a bronze, silver, and gold, and platinum, and diamond, and whatever plan. And entirely another thing to say that, and those are the only plans they can offer. So if I'm just going to pull Anthem out of a hat, it'll be one thing to say Anthem can only offer those plans. Another thing to say, well, Anthem, you have to offer these plans, but you can also offer the number 6 bus plan that you mentioned.
Right. The other thing we talked about pre-existing conditions. Right now, it is not only that insurers have to offer insurance for pre-existing conditions, but they have to offer insurance at the exact same price as somebody who doesn't have them. Would it be so horrific? Just an example, I'm throwing it out here. If you say to insurers, okay, you have to insure people even if they come with pre-existing conditions, but you can charge 1.5 times or twice or 3 times. I'm not going to say what specific number works best. The rate that you would charge for someone who doesn't have pre-existing conditions. Let the insurer acknowledge that, yes, there is some greater risk with pre-existing conditions. And while the government says we have to provide insurance from them, the government should also allow us to charge a higher premium for folks with pre-existing conditions.
Well, the problem with that,
who
DJ, hold on, DJ.
Who defines what is a pre-existing condition?
Right, and then are they all weighted? Are they all weighted the same? Is asthma the same as cancer?
And those are all fair questions. And the policy wonk in me would love to say that there are various standards and a whole bunch of other things. You don't have to have a situation where there is absolutely no difference between the price you charge for someone without pre-existing conditions and the price you charge for someone with pre-existing conditions.
DJ said on something very interesting here. It would be very interesting to see what would happen if the law simply said to the insurance company, if somebody comes to you seeking insurance, you have to give them a quote. I'm going to say for a rough comparison, if you're too tall to fit into an airline seat, you might have to pay for the extra legroom seat, but not going to carry you because you're too tall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it would be very interesting to see what would happen if they said, no, you can't deny coverage. You can charge more for coverage. You can do this, you can do that, but you have to give them a quote.
No,
now,
that makes perfect sense.
I still think this comes back to an overarching fallacy in this policy debate that getting everybody into an insurance policy is the end all and be all, and the bigger problem is those wide price disparities between if I go out of network, I'm in Florida and the hospital doesn't take Anthem, what do I do? The price disparity between that and I have insurance, and that is, I think, the more important thing to hit the turnaround and say, no, you can't charge 5 times as much for an X-ray because the person didn't have the right insurance plan.
Well, they're both problems. They're both problems. Yeah. But let's go back to the pre-existing condition, because that's a medical marketplace problem that, frankly, I don't think that the legislation is going to do much to change. But let's go back to that pre-existing condition thing. Cliff, what you proposed makes perfect sense in terms of it's a clean legal standard. The problem is that pretty much everyone has something that can be labeled a pre-existing condition. So insurers are going to have 2 rates. Their advertised rate for their Silver 80 plan, and then the real rate for people with pre-existing conditions. And maybe different conditions will have different rates. But the problem is that everyone will be quoted a higher rate than what they can afford, and that essentially will stop tens of millions of people from being insured. That's the problem.
Cliff, I don't know if you saw the story I posted probably about a week ago now about when I was denied an insurance policy because I was on 2 maintenance medications, one of which I only took when my seasonal allergies actually kicked in, the other of which was a generic. And that was determined to be a disqualifying pre-existing condition. For me, at the time, I was a 30-year-old non-smoker.
I can top that. I can top that. But before the ACA kicked in, when I had to be in the private market, I was given a higher quote for my kids, one who had mild asthma and takes no medication for it, the other one who has celiac disease, and there is no medication for it, and it requires no medical treatment. Celiac is purely a diet-oriented anomaly that you maintain a diet and you're fine. It has no medical consequence, and yet she was quoted a higher rate. The insurance companies will go crazy with this. Yeah. That's why the ACA was written the way it was. These ideas of just let the free market fix it. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Well,
it's just because the economics of healthcare are so different than standard economics because you can't substitute. Treatment is treatment, and you have to get what you have to get. You can't delay. Sometimes treatment is necessary right now. Sometimes you can't even fully consent to treatment if you're brought in on a stretcher. It's a consumable good that is unlike most other consumable goods. Insurance is a product that is a little bit more typical, but it is the middleman between you and the actual service provider. It's very strange.
I have to, as an economist, and I've looked at this for a while, and I when I was 22, I was turned down for insurance because I had a back condition called spondylolysis, which hardly anyone even knows exists. So yeah, I'm aware that there are pre-existing condition issues.
Isn't that
but
just
in terms
of the back?
The vertebrae aren't fully fused together. You're confusing it with scoliosis, which is much more well known.
Yeah. What you're saying sounds a little like the scrumdiddlyumptious bar in Willy Wonka.
Funny. Well done, Rebecca. But this actually, the only, in my opinion, the only real difference between the healthcare market and other markets is really the risk of payment for goods and services. Those who provide the goods and services have a much greater risk of non-payment because they essentially provide service without doing any of the credit checks that, say, a furniture salesman might do, or a car salesman might do, or a house salesman might do. That is something that, yes, should be addressed as a separate issue. I'm not getting into this now, even if I were sober, which I'm not. But the great part of the problem is that a number of states, I know Virginia has this, I don't know about California, I know about 35 states do, I don't know if California or Ohio or Maryland are among them, have what are known as certificate of public need regimes, where incumbent medical providers can essentially stop competition from being created if they can convince a bureaucrat, oh, hey, we got everything covered. You don't need another ICU facility. You don't need another CAT scan facility. We got everything covered. We can handle everything. It'd be best if you don't let them get in. We don't need the competition. That really is healthcare rationing. If you live in a certificate of public need state, you already have healthcare rationing. It's done by your state government, and you have no idea it's happening unless you've actually heard of certificate of public need. And nobody talks about it because it's not a federal issue, because it's too obscure for anybody to notice, and so nobody can find a real bad guy that they can yell at. And yet it is, I would say it is probably the biggest problem with our health care market, not the health insurance market, but it's our biggest problem with the health care market in that it is basically governments deliberately restricting supply because the incumbent providers tell them to.
And on that cheery note.
By the way, just
and
for those
DJ is still upright. He hasn't passed out drunk yet. This is
because I've only had 2 glasses of fire. I've only had 2 things of fire bourbon. If I had 3, I might be a little woozy. But as now, I can keep posture. It's all good.
Hey, what do you think about that Mexican president? You think he's going to actually build the wall?
Oh yeah, they're laying brick right now.
You know the irony here. The irony here is that half the reason that it's
a black fly in Chardonnay, isn't it?
Well, no,
Isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
But when we, a large part of the reason we don't have the problems with the Mexican border that we would think we would have is because Mexico itself is pretty nasty about its own border with Guatemala and Honduras. And that it is not an easy thing. If Mexican authorities have actually, if you're a Guatemalan or Honduran immigrant and you go, okay, I'm going to go through Mexico, unless you can actually make sure you don't stop in Mexico, you're not making it to the United States because Mexico will find you. The Mexican authorities will find you. And unless you can bribe them enough, you're going back to Guatemala and Honduras because they don't care. Mexico actually enforces its border pretty effectively, mainly because immigrants can't bribe the police enough.
Right, and they made Guatemala pay for that wall too, right?
Well, yeah.
But the thing is, they don't need a wall.
Border tax on
Guatemala. And there's the thing: if we actually have an immigration security issue, and again, I'm beginning to think that immigration control is just the rights version of gun control. It's symbolically wonderful, but substantively counterproductive. But the real issue we have are visa jumpers, folks who come on visas and then never go back. A wall is not going to stop them because most of them come by plane, and most of them don't come from
Mexico. We'll keep them in, actually.
Right.
Keep them in.
Let's not forget the tunnels too. Yeah, unless you go
I
down
actually
100
have a friend
feet,
who
a
keeps
tunnel.
joking that he's gonna, he needs to invest in factories in Mexico that make 22-foot ladders.
No, I got it.
We need a 22-foot ladder.
I understand it now. The Mexican wall is a secret plot that was designed to protect Israel because it means all the contractors that Hamas hires for tunnels will be unavailable because they'll be so busy building tunnels for Mexican migrants.
Right.
I understand it now. It makes sense.
Finally.
By the way,
this issue of
The
DJ
scary thing is if I actually put that up on Facebook, somebody at InfoWars would make it their top story the next day.
Nice.
I have a prediction that wall is going to be, it's going to be like the outfield wall at, Yankee Stadium. It's going to be littered with ads for Bank of America, Honda, Chevys Regal. I really believe this. He's going to sell advertising on that wall on both sides.
My husband and I have a theory that we're going to get a few 100 miles of wall built, and then he's going to hang a mission accomplished banner, go strutting out in front of it in a flight suit, and resign a la Sarah Palin.
No. Just the opposite. He's going to get 100 to 200 miles of it built, and then in 2020, his campaign will be, look, they said we weren't going to do it. We've got it started. If you want to finish it now, you have to reelect me.
Yep.
I think that's
it'll be a PBS.
I'm with Kevin on that one. I'm with Kevin on that one. He's right. Stay the course. His entire 2020 campaign will be finish the wall.
Yep.
Stay the course. 1,000 points of light.
It'll be 1,000 miles of wall. It won't be 1,000 points of light.
It's the economy, stupid.
It'll be 1,000 miles of wall.
On that note, I need to go grab some food before everything closes down for the night. So.
Oh, Cliff, you can't eat this late. It's not good for you.
Not good for you.
And my sleep cycle's already so far upside down, it's not even funny, but thank you.
But drinking this late is perfectly healthy.